After the age of 60, studies estimate that more than half of adults experience changes in leg circulation without even realizing it. What makes this concerning is not how common it is, but how quietly it happens. These changes rarely arrive with pain or an obvious warning. Instead, they develop slowly, blending into daily life and being dismissed as just another part of getting older. Over time, many people adapt without questioning why. They rest more, they move a little less, they adjust their routines and tell themselves this is simply what aging feels like. And by the time they begin to wonder whether something has changed, their body has often been compensating in silence for years. My name is Dr. James Wilson. I'm a physician, and for over 20 years, I've worked with adults navigating the physical changes that come with age. One pattern I see repeatedly is this. People don't miss important signals because they aren't paying attention. They miss them because no one ever explained what those signals look like in the first place. The body is actually very good at communicating early. It sends clues long before comfort, balance, or independence are seriously affected. These clues aren't dramatic, and they don't feel urgent, which is exactly why they're so easy to overlook. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 7 signs the body commonly uses when circulation in the legs begins to change after 60. I'll explain what they mean and why they matter, without medical jargon or extreme recommendations, and I especially encourage you to stay until the 6th sign. In my experience, it's one of the clearest clues we see in the clinic, and at the same time, one of the least understood. Before we get to the signs themselves, let me explain what's actually happening inside the legs as we age, because once you understand that, everything else becomes much clearer. Before we talk about the signs themselves, it's important to understand what's actually happening inside the legs as we get older. In my experience, once people understand this part, the signs stop feeling random or confusing. They start to make sense. When most people think about circulation, they think about the heart, and of course, the heart is essential. But the heart alone cannot move blood all the way from the feet back up to the chest. Gravity is always working against that process, especially when we're upright or sitting for long periods of time. To move blood out of the lower legs, the body relies on a system working together. The veins have to carry blood upward. The valves inside those veins have to close properly so blood doesn't fall back down. And just as importantly, the muscles in the lower legs, especially the calf muscles, have to contract and relax regularly. I often explain this to patients in simple terms. The calf muscles act like a second heart for the legs. Every time they tighten and release, they gently squeeze the veins that run through them and help push blood upward. This is sometimes called the venous pump, and it plays a major role in keeping the legs comfortable. When this system is working well, you don't notice it at all. You move through your day, sit, stand, walk, and your legs quietly manage circulation on their own. Blood flows upward, fluid doesn't settle. The legs feel relatively light and responsive. But this system depends on movement, not intense exercise, but regular, clear movement. Small actions like bending the ankles, standing up from a chair, or shifting weight from one leg to the other all send important signals to the muscles and veins. As we move past the age of 60, I begin to see a few predictable changes. People naturally become more cautious. They sit longer. They walk less. Joints don't move through the same range they once did. None of this feels dramatic, but it adds up. When the ankles don't bend as much and the knees don't fully straighten, the muscles around them don't activate as effectively. Over time, the calf muscles stop getting consistent signals to contract. The venous pump becomes weaker, not because something is broken, but because it's being used less. At the same time, the valves in the veins may not close as tightly as they once did. That makes it easier for blood to drift downward and remain there longer than it should, especially by late afternoon or evening. What's important to understand is that these changes usually don't cause sharp pain. They don't announce themselves clearly. The body adapts quietly, compensating in ways that keep you functioning, at least for a while. Eventually, though, the body begins to send signals. Not to alarm you, but to get your attention. Those signals are what we're about to talk about next. The first sign I want to talk about is something many people describe in very simple terms. They'll say their legs feel heavier than they used to, especially later in the day. Not painful, not dramatic, just heavier, more tired, and slower to respond by the afternoon or evening. In my clinic, this is often one of the earliest signals I hear about, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. Many adults over 60 assume this heaviness means they're simply losing strength or energy with age. But what's often happening is more specific than that. As circulation in the legs begins to slow, blood and fluid don't move upward as efficiently as they once did. Gravity pulls everything downward throughout the day, and if the muscles that normally help push blood back up aren't activating enough, that fluid lingers. The result isn't sharp pain. It's a dull, weighted sensation that makes the legs feel tired long before the rest of the body does. What's important to understand is that this heaviness often improves overnight. People wake up in the morning feeling relatively fine, only to notice the sensation returning as the day goes on. That pattern is a strong clue that circulation, not injury, is playing a role. I always tell patients to pay attention to timing. If your legs feel reasonably comfortable in the morning but noticeably heavier by late afternoon, especially after sitting or standing for long periods, that's your body giving you useful information. The good news is that this stage is often very responsive. You don't need intense exercise to address it. In fact, pushing too hard can make things worse. What helps most is restoring regular muscle activation throughout the day. Simple movements that encourage the calf muscles to contract and relax can make a meaningful difference over time. This isn't about forcing your legs to do more. It's about reminding them how to assist circulation again. When that happens, many people notice that their legs feel lighter, less fatigued, and more comfortable by the end of the day. If this sensation sounds familiar to you, it doesn't mean something is seriously wrong. It means your body is speaking early, and that's something we can work with. Now, let's move on to the second sign, which often appears alongside this one but tends to raise different concerns. The second sign often brings more worry, even though it usually develops just as quietly. People begin to notice that their ankles or feet don't look the same by the end of the day. Shoes feel tighter. Socks leave deeper marks. There may be a sense of fullness around the ankles that wasn't there in the morning. When patients mention this to me, many immediately worry about the heart or kidneys. While those concerns are understandable, swelling in the lower legs after 60 is very often related to how blood and fluid are moving or not moving out of the legs during the day. As circulation slows, blood returning to the heart through the veins faces gravity every step of the way. When the muscles that normally assist this process aren't activating enough, fluid can begin to collect in the tissues around the ankles and feet. This is especially common after long periods of sitting or standing, when the legs remain still for hours at a time. One detail I always ask about is how the swelling behaves overnight. If the ankles look closer to normal in the morning and gradually become more swollen as the day goes on, that pattern strongly suggests a circulation-related issue rather than an acute medical emergency. The body is still trying to manage fluid, but it needs more help than it used to. It's also important to understand that this kind of swelling doesn't always feel dramatic. It may not be painful. The skin may simply feel tighter, and movement may feel slightly restricted by evening. Because it's subtle, many people ignore it for a long time. At this stage, the goal is not to force fluid out aggressively. What helps most is restoring gentle movement that encourages blood and fluid to travel upward again. Regular activation of the lower leg muscles, combined with changes in how long and how often the legs remain still, can make a noticeable difference over time. I often reassure patients that noticing this early gives us options. The body is signaling that it needs support, not that it's failing. With the right approach, many people see swelling become less frequent and less uncomfortable. Next, we'll talk about a sign that tends to show up when the body is resting and often catches people off guard because it appears at night. The third sign often surprises people because it shows up when the body is supposed to be resting. Someone will tell me they're woken up at night by sudden cramping in the lower legs or feet, or they notice uncomfortable tightening when they're lying still. During the day, Their legs may feel manageable, but once they relax, the discomfort appears. Many adults assume this is simply dehydration or something they ate, and sometimes those factors play a role. But in my experience, frequent cramping at night after 60 is often connected to circulation and muscle signaling rather than a single dietary issue. When we're lying down, blood flow patterns change. During the day, gravity pulls blood downward, and muscle movement helps push it back up. At night, when the legs are still for long periods, muscles that haven't been activating well during the day may become more irritable. They're not getting consistent signals, and the balance between nerves, muscles, and blood flow becomes less stable. What I find important is how predictable these cramps can be. They often happen in the same muscles, at similar times, and improve when the person moves, stretches, or stands briefly. That tells us the muscle and circulation system is involved, not that something sudden or dangerous is happening. This is also one of the signs people tend to tolerate quietly. They adjust their sleep position, massage the leg, and go back to bed without mentioning it to anyone. Over time, though, disrupted sleep takes a toll, fatigue builds, and the body becomes less resilient during the day. At this stage, the solution is not aggressive stretching or pushing through pain. In fact, doing too much can make cramping worse. What helps most is improving how the muscles are used throughout the day, so they're not switching from inactivity to rest without preparation. Gentle, regular activation earlier in the day often reduces nighttime discomfort significantly. When patients understand this connection, they're often relieved. Night cramps don't mean the body is failing. They usually mean the system needs more consistent communication between movement, circulation, and rest. Next, we'll talk about a sign that feels different altogether, one that people often describe as strange or unsettling rather than painful. The fourth sign is one people often describe as unsettling rather than painful. It's a strange sensation, tingling, numbness, or a pins and needles feeling in the lower legs or feet. Some notice it when sitting still. Others feel it when they first stand up or when their legs have been in one position for too long. What makes this sign confusing is that it doesn't always feel muscular. People worry it might be a nerve problem, and sometimes nerves are involved. But very often, especially after 60, this sensation is closely tied to circulation and how well blood is reaching and leaving the tissues in the lower legs. When circulation slows, nerves can become more sensitive. They're still functioning, but they're not receiving the same steady supply of oxygen and nutrients they once did. As a result, they send mixed signals. The sensation may come and go, change location, or feel worse at certain times of day. One thing I listen for is whether the sensation improves with gentle movement. If tingling eases when someone stands up, shifts their weight, or moves their ankles, that's an important clue. It suggests the issue isn't damage, but communication. Blood flow improves slightly, and the nerves settle down. Many people try to ignore this sign because it doesn't stop them from moving. But over time, numbness or tingling can affect confidence. People become more cautious when walking or standing because their legs don't feel as reliable as they used to. At this stage, the goal isn't to desensitize the area or push through discomfort. What helps most is restoring regular circulation support so the nerves don't have to operate under stress. Gentle, repeated movement throughout the day often reduces these sensations more effectively than sporadic, intense effort. I often remind patients that this kind of tingling doesn't mean something is breaking down. It means the system is under strain and asking for support. When addressed early, many people notice their legs feel more present, more responsive, and less distracting throughout the day. Next, we'll talk about a sign that seems simple on the surface, but often surprises people because of what it reveals about circulation and body temperature. The fifth sign often seems minor at first, which is exactly why it's so easy to dismiss. People will tell me their feet or lower legs feel unusually cold, even when the room is warm and the rest of their body feels comfortable. Some notice they need socks more often. Others say their feet take a long time to warm up once they get cold. This isn't always about room temperature. After 60, Coldness in the lower legs is often related to circulation and how efficiently warm blood is reaching the tissues. When blood flow slows, the body prioritizes vital organs. The legs, especially the feet, may receive less warmth as a result. What makes this sign confusing is that it doesn't always happen all the time. A person may feel fine earlier in the day, then notice the cold sensation later, particularly after sitting for long periods or being inactive. That pattern is important. It tells us the issue is functional, not permanent. I often explain to patients that warmth is a sign of healthy circulation. When blood moves well, it carries heat with it. When circulation becomes less efficient, temperature regulation in the lower legs becomes inconsistent. The legs aren't damaged, but they're not being supplied as steadily as they once were. Many people try to solve this by simply bundling up, which can help with comfort, but doesn't address the underlying issue. What actually helps is encouraging the muscles to assist blood flow again. Gentle movement that activates the lower legs allows warm blood to reach the tissues more consistently. At this stage, people are often relieved to learn that cold feet don't automatically mean something serious is wrong. They usually mean the system needs support. With regular, appropriate movement, many patients notice that their legs feel warmer, more alive, and more responsive throughout the day. This sign is subtle, but it often appears alongside others we've already discussed. When several of these patterns show up together, they form a clearer picture of what the body is trying to communicate. Next, we'll talk about the sixth sign, the one I mentioned earlier. In my experience, it's among the clearest clues we see in the clinic. Yet, it's also one of the least understood. The sixth sign is one I pay very close attention to in the clinic because it often tells me how long the body has been adapting in silence. It's a visible change in the skin of the lower legs. The color may look darker, slightly reddish, purplish, or sometimes unusually pale. The texture may feel thinner, drier, or tighter than it used to. What makes this sign so important is that many people don't associate skin changes with circulation at all. They assume it's dryness, age spots, or simply aging skin. And while aging does affect the skin, circulation plays a much bigger role than most people realize. Healthy blood flow delivers oxygen and nutrients to the skin and helps remove waste products. When circulation slows over time, the skin is one of the tissues that quietly reflects that change. Blood may linger longer in the lower legs, or not reach the surface tissues as efficiently, leading to gradual changes in color and texture. I want to be very clear here. These changes do not usually appear overnight. They develop slowly, sometimes over years, which is why they're so often overlooked. People adjust to how their legs look without realizing that the appearance itself is giving them useful information. What I find encouraging is that noticing this sign doesn't mean something dangerous is happening. It means the body has been compensating for a while, and now it's showing that compensation on the surface. When addressed thoughtfully, circulation can often be supported enough to prevent further progression. At this stage, the goal is not to scrub, treat, or cover up the skin. The focus needs to be deeper than that. Improving how blood moves through the legs helps the skin receive more consistent nourishment over time. When patients understand this connection, they often feel a sense of relief rather than fear. The skin isn't failing, it's reflecting what's happening underneath. There is one more sign to discuss, and it ties everything together. It's the one that most directly affects daily movement and confidence, and it often determines whether people stay active or begin pulling back without realizing why. The seventh sign is the one that most directly affects daily life, and it's often the turning point I hear about in conversations with patients. People tell me they get tired much faster when standing or walking than they used to. Activities that once felt routine now require more effort, even if the distance or time hasn't changed. What's important here is that this fatigue doesn't usually feel like muscle soreness or shortness of breath. Instead, it's a deep sense of leg tiredness that appears quickly and improves with rest. Many people describe it as their legs giving out before the rest of their body feels done. In many cases, this happens because the muscles in the legs aren't getting the circulation support they need during activity. Walking and standing require a coordinated effort between muscles, joints, and blood flow. When circulation is less efficient, the muscles fatigue sooner, even during light or moderate movement. I often notice that people begin unconsciously adjusting at this stage. They shorten walks. They look for places to sit more often. They plan outings around how long they think their legs will last. None of this happens all at once, but over time, it can quietly shrink a person's world. What makes this sign especially important is how closely it's tied to confidence. When the legs feel unreliable, people naturally become more cautious. They hesitate. They avoid certain situations, and that hesitation can lead to even less movement, which further reduces circulation and strength. The key thing I want to emphasize is that this kind of fatigue doesn't mean the body is done adapting. It means the system is asking for a different kind of support. When circulation is encouraged in a safe, consistent way, many people find that their endurance gradually improves. They don't need to push harder. They need to move more intelligently. By the time someone notices this seventh sign, it's often because several of the earlier ones have been present for some time. Together, they form a clear message from the body. Not one of failure, but one of adjustment. Now that we've walked through all 7 signs, it's time to step back and talk about what they mean as a whole and what you can do moving forward. Before we end, I want to speak to you, not just as a physician, but as someone who has spent many years listening to people describe what it feels like when their body begins to change. If there is one message I hope you take from this video, it's this: your body is not betraying you. It is communicating with you. The signs we've talked about are not a verdict, and they are not something you should feel ashamed of or ignore. They are information. In my experience, people do best when they respond early and thoughtfully, not with fear or force, but with understanding. Small, consistent changes done in a way that respects where your body is today often matter far more than dramatic efforts that are hard to sustain. You don't need to push harder. You need to listen more clearly. I've seen many adults regain comfort, confidence, and a sense of control simply by recognizing what their legs were asking for and responding in a steady, patient way. Improvement rarely comes overnight, but it often comes when the body feels supported rather than pressured. At the same time, I want to be very clear about something important. Everything I've shared in this video is based on my clinical experience and on information gathered from well-established, reputable medical sources. It is meant to help you understand patterns and possibilities. It is not a diagnosis, and it is not a substitute for medical care. Every person is different. Circulation changes can have many causes, and some conditions require individual evaluation, testing, and treatment. If you are experiencing persistent symptoms, worsening discomfort, sudden changes, or anything that concerns you, the most responsible next step is to speak directly with a doctor or visit a qualified medical facility. A healthcare professional who can examine you in person is always the best source of guidance for your specific situation. Think of this video as a starting point, a way to become more informed, more aware, and better prepared to have those conversations. Knowledge empowers you to ask better questions and to take an active role in your health. If you found this information helpful, I encourage you to reflect on what resonated most with you and to continue learning. And most importantly, don't hesitate to seek medical advice when your body asks for it. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself and take those signals seriously. They matter.